Hi, and welcome to my Wednesday Gender Speaker live show, where today I'm going to be talking about hate crime and hate incidents. So, hate crime and hate incidents. Now, the reason I've picked up on this today is because I was glancing through Pink News and a few other news items and noticed that there had been a Home Office report. The annual hate crime statistics have just been released. And to be perfectly honest, they are pretty awful. Hate crime figures exceeded for the first time for a single year since they were started in 2012, 2011. 100,000 hate crime incidents and hate crimes. Now that's across all different types of protected characteristics. So I wanted to look at just a little bit about what these hate crime figures are all about and what we can probably do to do something to start to change the way this is all happening. I'm not going to look at the race figures. The race figures are always the biggest number simply because there are a larger number of people of other races. But also, this is about visibility in some, or in a lot of the cases, it's about visibility. If I can see that you seem to be other than white British, that then means that you become a target just by being visible. So what we'll see is, for example, the sexual orientation crime figures are up 19%. That's a fairly chunky increase. And of course, people who are LGBT are often visible. Now, visibility doesn't mean that you physically look different. Although obviously I know a lot of gay people, a lot of gay men can look quite camp. Not all camp people are gay, of course. But it means that they're visible. They also have a tendency to go to gay bars, to mix with other gay people, to go to gay prides. Although, surprisingly this year, there have been no gay pride events, which is a great shame because this was as I mentioned on Sunday, the 20th anniversary, also 50th anniversary of the 1970 parade to really remember what happened in Stonewall. So sexual orientation crimes up to 15,835, up 19%. Transgender crimes up 16% to 2,540. In the first year of reporting, the figures I was looking at, transgender figures were about 300 and something. So you can see, in fact, a massive, massive increase. In fact, just over the past 5 years, according to the report that's out this week, a 345% increase in 5 years. That's a huge, that's nearly fourfold increase in transgender hate crime in the space of 5 years. And this is over the period that we know that there has been an increasing rate of challenge coming from a variety of different groups against transgender people since that sort of tipping point of 2015. So what we're seeing is the tipping point, suddenly huge amount of visibility, lots of actors, lots of presenters, lots of trans media material. And as a result of that increased visibility, so we've got behind it that massive increase in the amount of hate crime and hate incidents taking place. The problem with all of this is that when Stonewall has undertaken some research, and they've done quite a bit of research on this, but I think their last figures were 2017. But I've seen figures going back a lot further than that, showing the same figure that around 80% of LGBT hate crime is not reported. In fact, with trans people, that figure used to be a lot higher. It was over 90% was one of the figures that I used in some of my workshops, that most trans people don't report a hate crime. Most gay people don't report a hate crime because if they do, that increases their visibility. If you increase your visibility, because hate crime tends to be about being visible, then that increases the risk that you're going to get attacked, you're going to get abused, you're going to get something happen which is going to be not nice, whether that's online or offline. A lot of this By the way, the hate crime tends to be offline, although there is an increasing number of online hate crime, and that's why that's being treated. So let's have a look at the difference between hate crime and hate incidents. And to do this, I'm going to have a quick look at and bring in a slide and look at a couple of bits and pieces on this. First of all, let's look at when we talk about hate crime and hate incidents, we're relating this to the protected characteristics under the Equality Act. So, now some of these aren't characteristics where an incident is considered to be hate. I'm going to come to the actual definition of that in a minute. So we're talking mostly about disability, gender reassignment, race, religion, and sexual orientation. There is currently a campaign moving ahead with some, I believe there's actually a bill being put forward, an amendment being put forward in the House of Commons to bring sex into this, because women are not protected. Attacks against women are often not considered to be hate crime, even though it is a misogynistic attack, and that should be part of this. The same with age. If somebody is attacked because they're old, that may be simply because people hate old people. So the ones that tend to be is transgender, race, religion, and sexual orientation, because there is a strong historical evidence of people attacking people with those protected characteristics simply because they have those characteristics and because there is some underlying level of hatred that's going on. So that's really where we are with that. So let's have a look at what is a hate incident. Now, any non-crime incident which is perceived by the victim or any other person, now this is really important, to be motivated by hostility or prejudice based upon a person's sexual orientation or perceived sexual orientation, or against a person who is transgender or perceived to be transgender. Now, these are a little bit of unpicking because it's a little bit of technical knowledge. Now, the important thing is it isn't just because if I get attacked, and I've had a hate crime, a quite extended hate crime against me by some kids. It was a long time ago now, well, 12 years ago. It wasn't just about whether I saw that to be a hate incident, in my case, a hate crime. It was whether did other people see it. So sometimes something can happen, and this is when we talk about incidents. An incident can be anything. Calling an abusive name across the street, making fun of people, anything that actually isn't a crime, but it demonstrates that somebody is actually inciting people, telling really horrible jokes. Harassment generally falls under the categories in many cases of a hate incident. It's not a crime, but it's perceived. It's an action perceived to be motivated by hostility or prejudice against someone who is trans or someone who is gay. And let's look at the perceived thing. It isn't because you're gay or because you're trans or because you're lesbian. It's because somebody thinks you're gay or trans or lesbian. That's the issue. If I see someone and think that they're gay and shout out abuse, even though they're not, then that's a hate incident. Now, why do we need to know about hate incidents? Because the reporting system for the police says if you see a hate incident, report it. Why? Well, if the police don't know that there is activity, homophobic activity, transphobic activity, race hatred, if they don't know that this is happening, they won't put resources in trying to make sure that it doesn't go any further. If there are lots of reports about incidents taking place, shouts of abuse, various different things, people being spat on, all these things which aren't a crime, but could be, well, actually, no, I suppose under COVID now spitting on somebody is a crime. But, where it's not a crime, it's still an aggressive, hostile behavior towards somebody because of their protected characteristic, that should be reported. And anyone can report it. You don't have to have the permission of the victim. If you see it, you can just report it. I'll look a little bit about how you can report it, but it's fairly simple. You can go online or you can make a phone call. Easiest thing is make a phone call. So, what's a hate crime? Well, that's simply any criminal offence which is perceived by the victim or other person to be motivated by hostility or prejudice based upon someone's sexual orientation or perceived sexual orientation, or somebody who's transgender or perceived to be transgender. So it's exactly the same thing, except that now a hate crime means it's a criminal offence. What's a criminal offence? Just look at the sorts of things that can include. Threatening behaviour. Now, I have a friend who was in a Morrison's store in Canterbury a couple of years ago, and somebody really kicked off. Absolutely no idea why it happened. I got the story. I didn't see it. I only got the story back. This guy absolutely went berserk in the store because she was trans, and he saw her and perceived, that this is a man dressed as a woman, and went off on one, shouting abuse and everything else. She quietly asked him to be to calm down and just to go away. He wouldn't. Continued to keep on and on. The police were called. He was arrested, and he got sentenced to 12 months imprisonment because it was perceived to be a hate crime. The important thing to remember about a hate crime is that if it was not against someone who was, because of their race, because if it's not perceived to be a hate crime, it's just a crime like threatening behavior, assault, robbery, there is a penalty for it. If you do that against someone who has a protected characteristic and it becomes a hate crime, you get twice the penalty. So if it would have been 1 year, if it would have been 6 months, you get 12 months. If it would have been 5 years, you get 10. That's, the impact of it becoming a hate crime is that the penalty is doubled, but also the police are much more likely to react quickly and deal with it. So damage to property, throwing things at your car, scratching your car, banging your door, all sorts of things, inciting other people to hate crime. So encouraging people to attack someone because they're Muslim, because they're gay, because they're trans, all of that becomes a crime. And harassment. I'll talk about harassment in just a second, but harassment also part of the Equality Act, but harassment can become a hate crime. Again, you've got to depend on exactly what it is. Harassment, these are the regulations on harassment. Harassment occurs when somebody engages in unwanted behavior, which is related to a relevant protected characteristic. Look at and this is all protected characteristics, which has the purpose or effect of violating a person's dignity or creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating, or offensive environment for that person. Now, this quite simply could just be telling an offensive joke. Okay? I have friends who've been at college where people students in the same room have been making transphobic or homophobic comments, and they were trans or in a relationship with someone who's trans or had a friend who was trans or a child who was trans, and felt very uncomfortable. They felt intimidated, unable to let anybody know. Now, what we get into this issue that I'm going to talk about in a minute of covering is living in a world where you daren't let anybody know that you're trans or that you have a connection with someone who's trans. Or you see, it's if I'm attacked in the street because somebody sees me with someone who's trans, that can be perceived as that's a hate crime as well, just because I was with somebody. Harassment, intimidating, making me feel bad because I'm with someone who's trans, because I'm with someone who's gay. It's all part of the same thing. So we'll come out of that now and come back to me here. 40% of trans and non-binary people experienced a hate incident or hate crime in the past 12 months. 40%. And I think the important thing here is 40% of trans and 40% of non-binary. And this is an important shift, because what we've been seeing is with the growing number of people now coming out as non-binary, they are getting the same level of targeting for hate incidents and hate crime as trans people. Now, this is someone who's just identifying as neither male nor female, somewhere in between. but they're getting a huge amount of harassment, a huge amount of hate incidents, unnecessarily, simply because they're not presenting themselves in the way that everybody thinks men and women should present themselves. So that quite surprised me. 20% of trans and non-binary are subjected to hate crimes and hate incidents, not because they're trans or non-binary, but because they're perceived to be gay or lesbian, because it's actually a sexual orientation thing. So, and this is in the last year, 20% of people were subjected to some level of hate crime or hate incident last year because someone saw them and thought, they must be gay. So that's, the way it is. In some surveys conducted by Stonewall, 44% of trans people avoid certain streets because they are actually terrified to walk down them, because they fear that they will be subjected to hate crime, that they will be attacked, even or maybe even worse. So can you see that this is not a small problem? This is a huge problem. Affects all LGBTQ people. It affects most people it affects all people of race. It affects people who are noticeably following a particular religion. So Muslim Jews have a tendency to get targeted because they wear clothes which basically out them and identify them as being particular. Sikhs, the same thing. So what can we do about this? Well, the first thing is report any incident or any hate crime. There's a simple number for this, 101. If it's a serious case, if someone is actually being attacked, then no, 999. If you can get evidence of what's going on, that's great. I don't mean just stand there filming it. Phone 999 first, then take some pictures or film. But, if you see, because, frankly, it can be quite scary. I've seen incidents take place on a tube when I've been on a tube where you think, oh, God, if I join in here, am I going to get attacked? And that's a great fear. So phone 999. Take a picture so people can see what's going on. It'll probably get picked up on CCTV anyway, because there's a lot of CCTV around. But it may be that just a simple thing, you can actually step up and call it out. So that's one of the other things you do. Be an ally. Oh, should be Anne instead of Anne there. Typo. Be an ally. Call out harassment. Call out incidents. So if somebody's making a comment and they're using the wrong pronouns, that's actually harassment. They're using the wrong pronouns when referring to a trans person. That's an opportunity for you to say, hey, no, it's she, or it's he, or it's them, or there. Call out the incidents that are going on. If somebody's making an offensive joke, you have no idea when someone's making offensive comments or saying something that isn't offending someone within within earshot of what's being said. They may have trans parents, they may have trans children, they may be in a relationship with someone who's trans, they may be secretly trans themselves, but scared to come out. Can you imagine what it's like to come to work and constantly have to guard every single thing you say for fear of outing yourself or your partner or your friends? Or how can you live? How can you work in an environment where you cannot be yourself? And that means you won't be as productive. And more organizations are recognizing this now, that we have to call this out and stop it. The problem is we've had a period of 5 years where, for a variety of reasons, Brexit, all sorts of things, there's sort of attitudes towards people who are migrants, the negative attitude towards trans people, all of this has built an undercurrent. And I think what's happened is that there's been a sense of, as a result of the Brexit vote, that actually people weren't called out. And therefore, it's like the actions of some politicians have been seen as giving permission to other people to act in a very, to harass and to act in a bigoted way. Online hate and report any online hate and harassment. So if you see a comment on Twitter, or you see it on Facebook or on LinkedIn, report it. Report the quote. Most of the social media companies, they've been very reluctant to engage, because big problem is that harassment, negative comments, controversial comments. I was at a conference, an online conference, and I saw a very well-respected speaker made a comment. And it was a simple comment. He was referring to Charles Dickens in this comment and said, Charles Dickens, who single-handedly invented Christmas. Well, I'll tell you what, there was a chat line going on. While people were listening, they could actually make chat. And people genuinely were making, love the idea, etc. All of a sudden, this went off, absolutely erupted. A chatter stream started with people making comments about who did and didn't start Christmas, and whether it was whether it was the Druids or whether it was the Christians. Anyway, nobody was listening to the speaker. And I suddenly watched that and I thought it was just an incident, but I can see what happens online. Somebody makes a comment, it's a bit of a bigoted comment. Somebody else has a little go at it. It might have been J.K. Rowling's making some comments against trans people. So somebody attacks her for it, and then she attacks back. And before you know where you are, there is a Twitter war going on, a complete battle. Now, the problem is what they've done with that is to make the comments very public. And I think that's the thing we've got to avoid. If you see online hate, online harassment, just report it. The police do take action. And there are some people who are getting very upset because they have been called out by the police for their actions. And somebody say, well, I only made one quote. Most of the incidents where I've known people have been called out and then they've made a big fuss about it, actually, I've seen evidence of 30 or 40 bigoted comments that they've made about anti-trans, anti-gay, or whatever. So the other thing is, don't engage with the trolls, because trolls are doing it just to get engagement. They may not even believe what they're saying, but they know if they say something very provocative, it will get engagement. It was a technique used over the Brexit elections. It's a technique that's being used by Trump. And it's a technique that's constantly being used to garner engagement. And what's happening in some cases is they're even tracking people who respond because they want to know who is who. Our identities are all over the internet now. Very difficult to hide who you are. All these trackers, cookies and things sitting on websites are picking up your details, picking up your contents. If you react to something, they've got it. They know. So if somebody wants to target people who have a particularly negative attitude, they'll pick that up. They'll see who's. You can see large numbers of people identifying themselves as having an issue on a particular topic, whether it's migration or race, whatever. So here's the problem. Stay away from it. The thing about trolls is if you don't engage, it dies. It dies in minutes. You know what it's like. You watch Twitter feed. You can't find the thing you were looking at 10 minutes ago because it's gone. It's disappeared off down the track, and you can't find it because the algorithms work in such a way now you can't really search the flows of information. There's just too much information flowing through. But you arrest it by engaging, making a comment, and that starts the process going. If it's hate, ignore it. Let it go. You can report it if it's sticking around, but best thing is to call it out if you see it physically. If you see it happening in the office, you see it happening around. If you see it in a bar, call it out, report it. 101, just dial 101. That's the non-emergency police number. You can report any hate crime. You can also go online and report it. But to be honest, the easiest thing is just make the phone call. True Vision is the place to report online. Anyway, that's it. And finally, the thing I was talking about, and this is really what we're trying to do, is we don't want a world where everybody has to go around hiding who they are, hiding their true selves. A book that inspired me back in the 60s was Why Am I Afraid to Tell You Who I Am by John Powell. And then he said, I'm afraid to tell you who I am, because if I tell you who I am and you don't like who I am, that's all I have. So we create masks. We create a mask that covers who we really are. I create a mask of who I think you want me to be. And that way I can be accepted. But the problem is that if you only ever accept that mask, then you never really truly accept me. And I have to spend the whole of my life protecting myself from anybody finding out who I am. And I know what that feels like. I did it for 50 years. Well, 40 years ago. I didn't really understand it the first 10. But to spend my whole life just trying to make sure nobody found out about the places I went, about who I was, and now out, the relief and the sense of relief I felt when I was able to come out. So there we go. That's today. Hate crime, hate incidents, big problem. We can do something about it. We can stand up. We can ally. We can support people who have protected characteristics. We can call people out if they're homophobic, if they're transphobic, if they're racist, Islamophobic, or whatever. Now, don't forget, I've got trans and non-binary workshop next week on 20th of October. And join me on Sunday when I'm going to be doing another LGBTQ history show. Not quite sure what I'm going to be talking about yet, but I shall find something interesting in the wonderfully rich history of the LGBTQ community. So there we are. That's it. I hope you've enjoyed today's little discussion on hate crime. It's a tough topic. But I look forward to seeing you on Sunday. Take care.